And now we're going to look at food safety legislation. Food safety legislation includes the Food Safety Act 1990, the Food Hygiene England Regulations 2006, the EC 852 2004 Regulation on the Hygiene of Foodstuffs. The penalties can be quite severe, which could include an unlimited fine and/or imprisonment up to 2 years. Food safety legislation is enforced under criminal law, and this is undertaken in the Magistrates Courts and the Crown Courts. The Magistrates Courts deal with the less serious, or what we call summary offences, and the penalties are not so severe. The penalties in the Magistrates Court are a £20,000 fine and/or 6 months imprisonment. The Crown Court deals with more serious or indictable offences. There the penalties are an unlimited fine and/or up to 2 years imprisonment. So, who are the food safety police? Who are the enforcing agents? Well, they're the environmental health officers or environmental health practitioners. Their role is to provide food safety advice, inspect food premises, and to enforce legislation covering food. The powers of enforcement officers are quite far-reaching. They can enter and inspect food premises at any reasonable time of the day or night, in other words when the business is usually open, and they can bring a police constable with them. They investigate outbreaks of foodborne disease and possible offences. They can remove suspect food and have it destroyed if it is considered to be unsafe to eat. They can serve improvement and prohibition notices. The difference between the two notices: an improvement notice gives time to rectify any deficiencies that the enforcement officers might have highlighted during an inspection. So if they, for example, carry out an inspection and they notice 3 deficiencies that are not likely to be in imminent danger to health, then they'll issue an improvement notice, which gives time, usually about a fortnight to 2 weeks, to rectify those deficiencies. A prohibition notice is issued to a business if the business ignores, first of all, the improvement notice, or if on the first inspection they notice something that's an imminent danger to health. So they can issue a prohibition notice which prohibits the offending practices immediately. So that could mean in effect closing the business down. They can take food businesses to court for breaking food safety laws. They can initiate a prosecution, but they can't prosecute. It's the courts that do the prosecuting. So the sort of evidence they could gather would be they can ask questions, they can take photographs, they can gather evidence, they can take samples, etc. And you as a food handler have certain legal requirements. You must keep yourself clean. You must keep the workplace clean. You must protect food from contamination or anything that could cause harm. You must follow good personal hygiene practices, for example, good hand washing regimes. Wear appropriate protective clothing, and tell your employer if you are suffering from or are a carrier of a foodborne illness. If you are found guilty of causing food poisoning, you could end up going to court and be prosecuted, and perhaps having to pay a fine or go into prison. It's not necessarily a manager or supervisor will end up in court, it could be you. So please keep this in mind, it's very important. Due diligence is a phrase used for a business's defence. It is a defence to prove that the business took all reasonable precautions and all due diligence to prevent the offence. In other words, your due diligence defence these days is your food safety management system, which consists of written records, and those written records can prove that you took all reasonable precautions in order to prevent contamination and or food poisoning. Since the 1st of January 2006, it's been a legal requirement for all food businesses, regardless of size, to implement a food safety management system based on the 7 HACCP principles. And HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point or points, and is a system that was developed in the 1950s to prevent food poisoning amongst astronauts.